My name is Scarlett Morrison, and I'm 24 years old. On Christmas Eve, while most families were wrapping presents and baking cookies, mine was gathered in our pristine living room delivering what felt like a death sentence to my future. The expensive crystal ornaments caught the firelight as my parents sat across from me, their faces stone cold with disappointment. My mother's manicured fingers clutched a folder of documents while my father's jaw was set in that familiar expression of absolute authority. Then came the words that shattered my world completely and forever changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and unconditional love. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready for a wild ride. Make sure to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now let's get into the shocking truth about what my parents really demanded from me that Christmas Eve. The folder my mother held contained my university withdrawal forms, already signed and dated. My father cleared his throat with the authority of someone accustomed to making business deals worth millions. They had called Northeastern University that afternoon, freezing my graduate program tuition payments until I provided what they called a sincere public apology to my adopted brother Derek for ruining his engagement party 3 weeks earlier. The accusation hit me like a physical blow because I knew the real story about that night, and it had nothing to do with jealousy or sabotage. 3 weeks ago, Derek's engagement party had been the social event of the season in our affluent Boston suburb. The country club was decorated with white roses and fairy lights, everything perfect for Derek's image as the golden boy who could do no wrong. I had worn my navy blue cocktail dress, determined to be supportive despite my growing unease about his relationship with Madison. Derek was 26, charming, successful, and everything my parents had always wanted in a son. He worked at my father's investment firm and lived in the guest house behind our family estate, playing the role of devoted son and brother to perfection. But that night, I found Madison crying in the country club bathroom, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her cheeks. She was gripping the marble countertop so hard her knuckles were white, and when she saw me in the mirror, her eyes filled with a desperate kind of relief. Madison told me that Derek had been systematically isolating her from friends and family, monitoring her phone calls, and making her question her own memory about conversations they'd had. She described how he would tell her she'd said things she never remembered saying, then accuse her of lying when she protested. The psychological manipulation was textbook emotional abuse, and I recognized it immediately from my psychology coursework. I was trying to comfort Madison, offering to help her contact a counselor or even just a safe place to think things through, when Derek burst through the bathroom door like he'd been listening outside. His transformation was instant and terrifying. The charming smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation as he assessed the situation. Within seconds, he had switched into victim mode, his voice breaking as he accused me of poisoning Madison against him because I was jealous of his happiness and success. He claimed I had always resented him for being adopted into the family and gaining our parents' love and approval. Derek's performance that night was Oscar-worthy. He managed to summon actual tears as he told Madison that I had a history of trying to sabotage his relationships because I couldn't stand seeing him happy. He painted me as unstable, claiming I'd been struggling with jealousy issues since our father's business had become more successful and Derek had taken on greater responsibilities at the firm. By the time we returned to the party, Derek had completely rewritten the narrative. Madison looked confused and guilty, apologizing to Derek for letting Scarlett upset her and promising it wouldn't happen again. My parents believed Derek's version instantly and completely. They didn't ask for my side of the story or question why I would suddenly develop such jealousy after years of supporting Derek. Mother actually pulled me aside that night and admitted she'd always worried about my jealousy issues despite never having mentioned such concerns before. The betrayal of that moment was devastating because it revealed how easily my own mother could be turned against me by Derek's manipulation. The pattern became clear as I reflected on years of similar incidents. Derek had always been skilled at positioning himself as the victim while making me appear unreasonable or unstable. When he'd crashed my car in high school, he'd convinced our parents that I had been pressuring him to drive too fast. When he'd borrowed money from my college fund, he'd made it seem like I was being selfish for objecting to helping family. Each time, he managed to come out looking generous and misunderstood while I appeared petty and difficult. Derek had powerful allies in this campaign against me. Aunt Beverly, my mother's sister, had always favored Derek and constantly praised his thoughtfulness and maturity in comparison to what she called my academic arrogance. Pastor Williams from our family's church had taken Derek under his wing, often using him as an example of redemption and second chances in his sermons. These supporters gave Derek's lies credibility and made my parents feel validated in their preference for their adopted son. Now Derek was demanding that I provide a public apology at Christmas dinner in front of our entire extended family. He wanted me to admit that I had tried to sabotage his engagement out of jealousy and acknowledge my need for professional help to deal with my issues. The ultimatum was clear: apologize publicly and submit to whatever treatment my parents deemed necessary, or lose all family support including my education, housing, and financial assistance. Christmas morning arrived with a cruel mockery of holiday traditions. Instead of the usual thoughtful gifts, I found a stack of self-help books under the tree with titles like Overcoming Sibling Jealousy and Managing Destructive Emotions. The message was crystal clear: my family had accepted Derek's narrative so completely that they genuinely believed I needed therapeutic intervention for my supposed mental health issues. My parents watched with satisfaction as I unwrapped each humiliating volume, nodding approvingly as if they were providing exactly what I needed to become a better person. The extended family began arriving at noon for our traditional Christmas dinner. 15 relatives filled our spacious home, including cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who had been part of our celebrations for decades. Derek had clearly been busy during the 3 weeks since his engagement party, because everyone seemed to know his version of recent events. My cousins Emma and Lily, who had always been close to me, now regarded me with a mixture of pity and wariness. Emma actually told me privately that Derek had explained how I was going through a difficult time and might need professional help to deal with my jealousy and anger issues. The most shocking betrayal came from Uncle Grant, my father's younger brother, who had always been my strongest supporter in the family. Grant was a successful lawyer with a reputation for fairness and thorough investigation before making judgments. Yet even he seemed to have accepted Derek's story, though I noticed something different in his expression. While the others looked at me with disappointment or concern, Uncle Grant's eyes held a question, as if he was trying to piece together information that didn't quite fit. During the pre-dinner gathering, he quietly slipped me a note that simply read "Something's not right" and squeezed my hand in a way that felt like solidarity rather than pity. Derek had orchestrated the day's events with military precision. He positioned himself as the gracious host, helping my mother serve drinks and making charming conversation with elderly relatives. Madison stayed close to his side, but I noticed how she flinched slightly whenever he touched her and how her smiles never quite reached her eyes. When Derek announced to the gathered family that today would hopefully mark a new beginning for family healing, the room fell silent with anticipation. The forced apology ceremony was more humiliating than I could have imagined. Derek had actually written out a statement for me to read, acknowledging my unstable behavior and jealousy-driven actions that had caused pain to Derek and Madison during what should have been a joyful time. My father stood behind me like a bailiff ensuring compliance while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the wounded parent trying to hold the family together. Reading those words aloud felt like swallowing poison. Every sentence was designed to reinforce Derek's narrative while stripping away my credibility and autonomy. I was forced to admit to motivations I'd never had and behaviors I'd never exhibited. The worst part was watching my extended family nod along approvingly, believing they were witnessing my first step toward mental health and family reconciliation. Several relatives actually applauded when I finished reading, as if I had just performed some brave act of personal growth. But Derek wasn't satisfied with just the verbal apology. He insisted that I demonstrate my sincerity by kneeling while delivering it, claiming that physical humility was necessary to show I understood the gravity of my actions. The symbolism was deliberate and cruel, Derek standing tall and vindicated while I was literally brought low before him and the entire family. Uncle Grant's face went pale during this part of the ceremony, and I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. Derek's final triumph came when he announced that his engagement to Madison was now saved thanks to the family's support in helping me face my issues. He thanked everyone for standing by him during this difficult time and expressed hope that with proper treatment, I could eventually become a healthy and supportive sister again. The implication was clear. My mental health was the problem, Derek was the victim, and only through submission and therapy could I earn my way back into the family's good graces. The rest of Christmas dinner passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Relatives made careful conversation around me, treating me like a recovering invalid who might have a setback at any moment. Derek basked in the attention and sympathy, playing his role perfectly as the long-suffering brother who just wanted his family to be whole again. Madison barely spoke throughout the meal, picking at her food and responding to questions with single-word answers that Derek would elaborate on her behalf. By the end of the day, I felt completely isolated and defeated. My education was suspended, my family had turned against me, and I was facing the prospect of mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment for conditions I didn't have. Derek had successfully painted me as the problem while positioning himself as both victim and solution. The golden boy had won completely, and I was left wondering if I was actually losing my mind or if something far more sinister was happening in my family. Uncle Grant called me the next morning while the rest of the family was still recovering from Christmas dinner. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear anger underneath his professional composure. He asked to meet me privately at a coffee shop downtown, away from the family home and Derek's potential surveillance. When I arrived, Grant was already seated in a corner booth, his lawyer instincts having chosen the most private spot available. His first words confirmed what I had hoped: something is very wrong with Derek's story, and I think you're being systematically destroyed. Grant explained that his legal training had taught him to recognize inconsistencies in testimonies and evidence. Derek's version of events contained several details that didn't align with Grant's observations from the engagement party. He had been standing near the bathroom area when Derek had discovered me upsetting Madison, and the timeline didn't match Derek's claims. Grant had also noticed how quickly Derek's emotional state had shifted from devastation to control, suggesting practiced manipulation rather than genuine distress. More disturbing were Grant's revelations about Derek's romantic history. As a lawyer, Grant had access to background check services and had done some preliminary research after becoming suspicious. Derek had been engaged twice before Madison, and both previous relationships had ended with eerily similar patterns. His first fiancée, Jessica, had broken off their engagement after what Derek described as her sudden mental breakdown. His second fiancée, Amber, had also ended things after Derek claimed she had become paranoid and unstable. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Grant provided me with contact information for Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist who specialized in psychological manipulation and abuse cases. Dr. Chen agreed to meet with me that afternoon, and within the first hour of our conversation, she had identified multiple red flags in Derek's behavior. She explained that skilled manipulators often target family dynamics because the existing emotional bonds make victims more vulnerable to gaslighting and less likely to seek outside help. Dr. Chen encouraged me to document everything I could remember about Derek's manipulation tactics over the years. As I began writing down incidents I had previously dismissed or forgotten, a disturbing pattern emerged. Derek had been systematically undermining my credibility with my parents for years, always in subtle ways that seemed reasonable in isolation. He would mention concerns about my stress levels after exams, suggest that I was becoming too focused on academics at the expense of family relationships, and occasionally hint that my success might be making me arrogant or competitive. The documentation process revealed how Derek had been positioning himself as the family's emotional caretaker while painting me as increasingly difficult and unstable. He volunteered to handle family communications during busy periods, offered to help with my parents' technology problems, and always seemed available when they needed support. Meanwhile, he would express private concerns about my behavior to them, creating doubt about my character while presenting himself as the worried brother trying to help. My research into Derek's past led me to track down Amanda, his first ex-fiancée, through social media. Amanda was hesitant to talk initially, but when I explained the situation with Madison and my family, she agreed to meet. Her story was chilling in its similarity to what I was experiencing. Derek had spent months convincing Amanda that she was becoming paranoid and irrational, questioning her memory of conversations and making her doubt her perceptions of reality. Amanda described how Derek had gradually isolated her from her support system by creating conflicts with her friends and family. He would tell her that people had said things about her that they hadn't actually said, then act hurt when she tried to verify these claims. He convinced her family that she was becoming unstable by sharing carefully edited recordings of their arguments and expressing concern about her mental health to her parents. By the time Amanda realized what was happening, her entire support system believed Derek's version of events. The most terrifying part of Amanda's account was how Derek had documented her erratic behavior by secretly recording her emotional reactions to his manipulation. When she would get upset about his lies or controlling behavior, he would record her responses and later present them as evidence of her instability. He had built an entire file of proof that Amanda was mentally unwell, which he shared with her family and friends as evidence of his concern for her well-being. Derek discovered my investigation when he found Amanda's contact information in my phone during one of his visits to the family home. His response was immediate and vicious. He told my parents that I was stalking and harassing his ex-girlfriends as part of a delusional campaign against him. He claimed that my behavior had escalated to the point where I was now pursuing women from his past in an attempt to build false allegations against him. My parents' response to Derek's accusations was swift and severe. They conducted a complete search of my room and confiscated all my electronic devices, claiming they needed to monitor my communications for signs of dangerous or obsessive behavior. Mother suggested that I might need immediate psychiatric evaluation because my fixation on Derek was becoming genuinely concerning. The fact that they believed Derek without question while treating my explanations as symptoms of mental illness showed how completely he had turned them against me. The third major betrayal came when Mother admitted privately that she was considering having me committed for psychological evaluation if my harassment of Derek's ex-girlfriends continued. She had already researched facilities that specialized in treating young adults with personality disorders and delusional thinking. The irony was devastating. While trying to expose Derek's psychological manipulation, I was being labeled as the one who needed mental health intervention. Derek's response to my investigation marked the beginning of his most sophisticated and dangerous manipulation campaign yet. He understood that I was getting close to exposing his lies, so he shifted tactics from defensive positioning to active offense. His new strategy involved manufacturing concrete evidence of my supposed mental instability while simultaneously presenting himself as the concerned family member trying to protect everyone from my increasingly erratic behavior. The first piece of fabricated evidence appeared 3 days after my parents confiscated my electronics. Derek claimed to have found threatening notes in his car and around the guest house where he lived, all allegedly written by me in moments of jealous rage. The handwriting was remarkably similar to mine, suggesting Derek had practiced replicating my penmanship or had somehow obtained samples of my writing to copy. The notes contained phrases like "you don't deserve happiness" and "Madison will see your true face," language designed to support Derek's narrative about my jealousy and instability. Derek's friends Brad and Kyle suddenly came forward with testimony about my supposedly erratic behavior around campus and in public places. They claimed to have witnessed me following Derek, muttering angrily to myself, and acting aggressively toward women who spoke to him. These false witnesses provided Derek with third-party validation that seemed to prove his claims about my deteriorating mental state. My parents accepted these testimonies without question, viewing them as confirmation of their worst fears about my psychological condition. Madison made several attempts to tell the truth during this period, but Derek had anticipated this possibility and prepared countermeasures. Whenever Madison tried to speak privately with my parents or other family members, Derek would interrupt with urgent concerns about how I was manipulating her by feeding her false memories and paranoid thoughts about him. He claimed that I was systematically trying to turn Madison against him by convincing her that normal relationship disagreements were actually signs of abuse. Derek's manipulation of Madison reached new levels of cruelty during this period. He told her that if she didn't support his version of events, it would prove that she was too weak and unstable to be a good wife and mother. He convinced her that her family's approval of their engagement depended on her ability to stand by him during this crisis with his mentally ill sister. The psychological pressure on Madison was enormous, and I could see her deteriorating under the strain of maintaining Derek's lies while knowing the truth. Pastor Williams played a crucial role in Derek's escalation campaign by organizing what he called an intervention meeting at our family's church. Under the guise of spiritual guidance and family healing, Pastor Williams led a session where Derek tearfully described his fears for my safety and the safety of others around me. He painted a picture of a young woman spiraling into dangerous delusions and obsessive behaviors that required immediate professional intervention. The church intervention was attended by several prominent families from our social circle, giving Derek's narrative even more credibility and community support. Pastor Williams spoke eloquently about the importance of getting help for family members who were struggling with mental health issues, using biblical references about healing and restoration to make my parents feel righteous about their decision to force treatment on me. The religious framing made it nearly impossible for anyone to question Derek's motives without appearing to oppose Christian charity and family loyalty. Derek began making subtle threats about how my dangerous behavior might affect the family business reputation. He suggested to my father that word of my mental breakdown and harassment campaign could spread through their professional circles, potentially damaging the investment firm's credibility with clients. This business angle gave my father additional motivation to resolve the situation quickly and quietly, preferably through institutionalization rather than public family therapy or mediation. The financial manipulation escalated when Derek suggested that cutting me off completely might be for my own good and would force me to seek the help I needed. He convinced my parents that continued financial support was actually enabling my destructive behavior and preventing me from taking responsibility for my actions. This economic pressure was designed to make me more desperate and willing to accept whatever treatment or conditions Derek demanded. Derek's most dangerous escalation came when he started hinting that I might be capable of violence toward myself or others. He claimed to have heard me making threats during phone conversations with unknown individuals and expressed fears that my obsession with him was reaching levels where intervention was urgently needed. This suggestion of potential violence gave my parents legal justification for pursuing involuntary psychiatric commitment. The second near-defeat moment arrived when my parents scheduled a consultation with a psychiatric facility that specialized in treating young adults with personality disorders and delusional thinking. Dr. Margaret Foster, the facility's director, was known for her work with patients who had become fixated on family members or romantic partners. My parents presented her with Derek's carefully compiled evidence of my declining mental state and erratic behavior. Derek's documentation was impressively thorough and professionally presented. He had created a timeline of my supposed deterioration, complete with witness statements, physical evidence, and detailed descriptions of concerning behaviors. The file included photos of the threatening notes, recorded statements from Brad and Kyle, and even medical opinions from Pastor Williams about my spiritual and emotional condition. To an outside observer unfamiliar with Derek's manipulation tactics, the evidence appeared overwhelming and credible. Dr. Foster recommended a 72-hour psychiatric hold followed by a comprehensive evaluation and potential long-term treatment program. The legal paperwork was already being prepared when Uncle Grant intervened with his own investigation findings. Grant had been working with private investigator Marcus Thompson to verify Derek's claims and had discovered significant inconsistencies in the timeline and witness testimonies. Derek's final desperate tactic involved claiming that I had directly threatened to harm myself and others during a phone conversation he had allegedly overheard. This escalation was designed to trigger emergency psychiatric intervention laws that would allow my parents to have me committed immediately without waiting for court hearings or extensive evaluations. The false suicide threat was Derek's nuclear option, calculated to eliminate any remaining opposition to my removal from the family. The isolation was now complete. My family had forbidden anyone from supporting or communicating with me without supervision. My educational future was suspended indefinitely. My financial resources were cut off. My electronic communications were monitored. Derek had successfully positioned himself as the reasonable family member trying to help a dangerously unstable sister while protecting innocent people like Madison from my delusional harassment. The golden boy had never looked more golden, and I had never appeared more tarnished. Uncle Grant's investigation with private investigator Marcus Thompson had been proceeding quietly in parallel with Derek's escalating manipulation campaign. Grant's legal experience had taught him the importance of documentation and verification, so he had been systematically checking every aspect of Derek's claims while building a counter-narrative based on facts rather than emotional manipulation. What they discovered was far worse than a simple case of sibling rivalry or psychological abuse. Marcus Thompson's background investigation revealed that Derek's pattern of manipulation and financial exploitation spanned multiple states and several different families. Before being adopted by my parents 15 years ago, Derek had been in foster care with 2 other families, both of which had eventually requested his removal due to what social workers had documented as disruptive and manipulative behavior toward other children in the home. The adoption agency had either failed to disclose this history or had downplayed its significance when matching Derek with my family. The breakthrough came when Madison finally found the courage to secretly record one of her phone conversations with Derek. She had been using an old phone that Derek didn't know about, and she managed to capture him admitting to several of his manipulation tactics in explicit detail. Derek described how he had been training my parents to doubt my credibility for years and how easy it had been to turn them against me once he decided to escalate his campaign. He laughed while explaining how he had practiced copying my handwriting and how simple it was to get his friends to lie about witnessing my supposed erratic behavior. Amanda, Derek's first ex-fiancée, had been gathering her own evidence since our conversation. She had saved all of Derek's manipulative text messages and emails from their relationship, and she had documented the false stories he had told her family and friends. Amanda also had medical records showing the stress-related health problems she had developed during her relationship with Derek, providing objective evidence of the psychological damage his manipulation had caused. The third ally who emerged during this investigation was Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor who lived directly across from the guest house where Derek stayed. Mrs. Rodriguez was a retired school teacher with sharp observational skills and a habit of keeping detailed notes about neighborhood activities. She had witnessed Derek staging several of the incidents he had reported to my parents, including placing the fake threatening notes in his own car and around the guest house property. Mrs. Rodriguez had photographs taken from her window that showed Derek placing the notes himself, then discovering them hours later when my parents were home to witness his distress. Her documentation included precise timestamps that proved Derek's version of events was impossible. She had also observed Derek practicing emotional outbursts and rehearsing conversations in his car before entering the main house to report new incidents to my parents. The most damning discovery was Derek's financial scheme involving my father's investment firm. Marcus Thompson's investigation revealed that Derek had been systematically embezzling funds from client accounts over the past 18 months, using sophisticated accounting tricks to hide the theft. The stolen amount totaled over $150,000, and Derek had been using the family crisis he had manufactured around my supposed mental health issues to distract attention from irregularities in the firm's financial records. Derek's embezzlement scheme was particularly clever because he had been stealing small amounts from multiple accounts rather than large sums from individual clients. He had also been timing the thefts to coincide with market fluctuations that could potentially explain minor discrepancies in account values. The only reason Marcus Thompson discovered the pattern was because he had been looking specifically for financial motivations behind Derek's campaign against me. Technology evidence proved crucial in exposing Derek's lies. Marcus Thompson had contacts in digital forensics who were able to retrieve deleted text messages from Derek's phone that showed his coordination with false witnesses Brad and Kyle. The messages revealed detailed planning about what testimony they would provide and how much Derek was paying them for their cooperation. Derek had also been researching psychiatric facilities and involuntary commitment procedures weeks before claiming to be concerned about my mental health. Pastor Williams' complicity in Derek's scheme was exposed when Grant's investigation revealed that the pastor had been receiving substantial donations from Derek's embezzled funds in exchange for providing spiritual validation of Derek's claims about my mental state. The church's financial records showed several large anonymous donations that corresponded exactly with Derek's theft timeline. Pastor Williams had essentially been paid to provide religious credibility for Derek's manipulation campaign. Derek's response to the mounting evidence was to escalate his claims about my dangerousness to the level of police involvement. He filed a report claiming that I had made specific threats against his life and had been stalking him in ways that made him fear for his safety. Derek presented the fake threatening notes as evidence and claimed that my behavior had become so erratic that he needed official protection from my violence. The fourth major betrayal came when my father, based solely on Derek's claims and fake evidence, filed for a restraining order against me that would prohibit any contact with Derek or attendance at family events. This legal action meant that I was now officially classified as a potential threat to my own family, making it nearly impossible for me to defend myself or present alternative evidence. The restraining order also gave Derek legal cover to claim that any attempts by me to contact family members were violations that proved his point about my dangerous obsessions. Grant and Marcus Thompson worked frantically to gather counter-evidence before the restraining order hearing. They had Madison's recorded confession, Amanda's documentation, Mrs. Rodriguez's photographic evidence, and the financial forensics showing Derek's embezzlement. However, Derek had been careful to present his case first and establish the narrative framework that would make any evidence against him appear to be part of my supposed delusional campaign. Madison's full confession proved to be the turning point in the investigation. She revealed that Derek had been threatening her family's business relationships and her father's professional reputation if she didn't maintain his version of events. Derek had convinced Madison's parents that their daughter was too emotionally fragile to handle stress and that opposing Derek's family would result in Madison having a complete psychological breakdown. The manipulation web extended far beyond just my immediate family. The evidence gathering reached a critical mass when Amanda agreed to provide formal testimony about Derek's abuse patterns and Mrs. Rodriguez offered to present her photographic documentation in court. Uncle Grant now had enough evidence to challenge the restraining order and potentially expose Derek's entire manipulation campaign. However, Derek seemed to sense that his position was becoming vulnerable, and he began preparing for what would become his most desperate and dangerous phase of psychological warfare. Uncle Grant and Dr. Chen developed a strategic plan for presenting the evidence against Derek that would maximize its impact while minimizing opportunities for him to spin the revelations as further proof of my instability. Grant's legal experience guided the approach. Present the financial evidence first to establish Derek's criminal motives, follow with documented manipulation patterns to show consciousness of guilt, and conclude with victim testimonies to demonstrate the human impact of his abuse. The confrontation began when Grant requested a formal family meeting to discuss new information about my case before proceeding with psychiatric commitment. My parents agreed reluctantly, viewing it as a final opportunity for family healing before taking the drastic step of long-term institutionalization. Derek attended confidently, believing his position was unassailable and that any evidence against him could be dismissed as products of my supposed delusional thinking. Amanda, Madison, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Marcus Thompson were present as witnesses, along with Dr. Chen to provide professional analysis of the manipulation tactics. Derek's initial reaction to seeing his victims gathered together was telling, a brief flash of genuine fear before his practiced mask of concern and confusion slipped into place. He immediately began positioning himself as the target of an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by my deteriorating mental state. The financial evidence hit first and hardest. Marcus Thompson presented bank records, client account discrepancies, and digital forensics showing Derek's systematic embezzlement from the family business. The documentation was overwhelming and undeniable. Derek had stolen $150,000 over 18 months, using increasingly sophisticated methods to hide the thefts. My father's face went white as he realized the scope of the betrayal and the potential damage to his business reputation. Derek's response to the financial evidence revealed his true character in a way that no amount of victim testimony could have achieved. Instead of denial or remorse, he immediately blamed the discovery on my harassment campaign and claimed that I had somehow manipulated the financial records to frame him. He suggested that my obsession with destroying him had driven me to elaborate forgery and that the investigation itself proved how dangerous my delusions had become. Pastor Williams' financial complicity was exposed through church donation records that perfectly matched Derek's embezzlement timeline. The pastor's attempts to maintain his spiritual authority while defending what was clearly a financial arrangement destroyed his credibility entirely. Aunt Beverly, faced with evidence of the donations she had unknowingly facilitated through church committees, finally admitted that she had always known something felt wrong but had been afraid of losing her position in the family hierarchy. Madison's recorded confession played like a documentary of psychological abuse in real time. Derek's voice was clear and unmistakable as he described his manipulation tactics, laughed about how easy it was to fool my parents, and detailed his plans for having me committed to eliminate opposition to his schemes. The recording captured Derek's genuine personality, cold, calculating, and completely devoid of empathy for the people he was destroying. Derek's mask finally slipped completely when confronted with Madison's recording. The charming facade that had fooled everyone for years crumbled, revealing the narcissistic rage underneath. He accused Madison of betraying him after everything he had done for her, claimed that she was too weak and stupid to understand the complexities of family dynamics, and threatened to destroy her reputation if she continued supporting lies about him. Amanda's testimony provided historical context that made Derek's current behavior clearly part of a long-standing pattern rather than a recent development. Her detailed documentation of Derek's previous manipulation campaigns showed identical tactics applied systematically across multiple relationships and family situations. The consistency of Derek's methods proved that his abuse of me and Madison was calculated and intentional rather than reactive or emotional. Mrs. Rodriguez's photographic evidence was perhaps the most damning because it removed any possibility of interpretation or alternative explanation. The timestamps and visual documentation showed Derek physically placing the threatening notes he later claimed to have found, practicing emotional reactions before reporting incidents to my parents, and coordinating with his false witnesses Brad and Kyle. The photographs were objective proof that Derek had been manufacturing evidence to support his lies. My father's reaction to seeing his business records manipulated and his trust betrayed was explosive. The financial theft represented not just personal betrayal but potential criminal liability and professional ruin. Dad realized that Derek's manipulation campaign against me had been designed partly to distract attention from the embezzlement and create family chaos that would make financial irregularities harder to detect. Derek's final desperate tactic was to threaten suicide if the family persecuted him based on what he claimed was a conspiracy of lies orchestrated by my mental illness. This manipulation attempt backfired completely because Dr. Chin immediately identified it as a classic abuse tactic and explained how Derek was trying to use emotional blackmail to avoid accountability for his criminal behavior. The second near-defeat moment came when Derek attempted to physically attack Madison for betraying him by recording their conversation. His violent outburst provided final proof of his true nature and eliminated any remaining doubt about his capacity for manipulation and abuse. Uncle Grant physically restrained Derek while my father called the police, marking the first time Derek faced actual consequences for his actions. Derek's psychological evaluation, ordered by the court after his assault on Madison, revealed narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. Dr. Foster, the same psychiatrist who had been prepared to commit me, now recommended long-term treatment for Derek along with criminal charges for his financial crimes and pattern of psychological abuse. The irony was perfect. Derek's own manipulation tactics had been turned against him through proper investigation and documentation. Madison's public disclosure of Derek's abuse, witnessed by the entire family, created a watershed moment where his lies could no longer be maintained. Her courage in speaking truth despite threats and manipulation inspired other family members to examine their own experiences with Derek and recognize manipulation patterns they had previously dismissed or ignored. The confrontation ended with Derek's complete exposure and my family's shocked recognition of how thoroughly they had been manipulated. However, the damage to family relationships and trust would require months or years to repair, and Derek's final acts of desperation were yet to come as he faced the collapse of everything he had built through lies and manipulation. Derek's response to his complete exposure was to double down on his victimization narrative while simultaneously attempting to destroy as much evidence and as many relationships as possible before facing legal consequences. His desperation made him increasingly reckless and revealed the full extent of his narcissistic personality and willingness to harm others to protect his own interests. Derek's first strategy was to claim that the entire family had turned against him due to jealousy of his success and resentment about his adoption. He portrayed himself as the outsider who had worked hard to earn love and acceptance, only to be betrayed by the biological family members who had never truly accepted him. This narrative was designed to appeal to extended family and community members who might not have access to all the evidence against him. The false victim story extended to claims that the biological family had always favored me despite his superior academic and professional achievements. Derek pointed to his business degree, his position at the investment firm, and his engagement to Madison as proof that his success had created resentment among family members who couldn't accept an adopted child outperforming their biological daughter. He conveniently ignored the fact that his professional position had been nepotism and his success had been built partly on embezzled funds. Pastor Williams attempted to save his own reputation by betraying Derek and revealing the full extent of their financial arrangement. The pastor admitted that Derek had offered large donations in exchange for spiritual validation of his claims about my mental health. Pastor Williams produced records showing that Derek had paid him over $20,000 from embezzled funds to provide religious credibility for the family intervention and psychiatric commitment plans. Derek's financial crimes were fully exposed when forensic accountants completed their analysis of the investment firm's records. The embezzlement totaled $153,000 across 47 different client accounts over 18 months. Derek's methods had been sophisticated enough to avoid detection through normal auditing processes, but his pattern became clear once investigators knew what to look for. Several clients had been unknowingly subsidizing Derek's lifestyle and manipulation campaigns. The legal consequences began immediately when the district attorney's office filed charges for embezzlement, fraud, and harassment based on the evidence Uncle Grant had compiled. Derek's bail was set at $500,000, which my father refused to pay after realizing the full scope of Derek's betrayal. Derek's court-appointed attorney advised him to consider a plea bargain given the overwhelming evidence against him. Derek's manipulation of extended family relationships became apparent when several relatives came forward with stories of lies Derek had told about me over the years. Cousin Emma revealed that Derek had claimed I was jealous of her academic success and had asked him to help manage family tensions around my competitiveness. Cousin Lily admitted that Derek had suggested I might need professional help for anger management issues that she had never actually witnessed. Uncle Grant's investigation revealed that Derek had been systematically attempting to undermine my relationships with family members by spreading false concerns about my mental health and character. Derek had positioned himself as the family member who was most worried about my well-being while secretly working to isolate me from potential support systems. His manipulation had been so subtle and consistent that most family members hadn't recognized it as a coordinated campaign. Madison's family became involved when they learned about Derek's threats against their business and professional relationships. Madison's father, a successful contractor, revealed that Derek had made veiled threats about damaging business relationships if Madison's family didn't support his version of events regarding my mental health. Derek had essentially held Madison's entire family hostage to maintain her cooperation with his lies. The community impact of Derek's exposure was significant because he had been actively involved in church leadership and local business organizations. His arrest for embezzlement and fraud sent shockwaves through social circles that had viewed him as a model young man and future community leader. Several people came forward with stories about Derek's manipulative behavior that they had previously dismissed as minor personality quirks. Derek's psychological evaluation revealed more disturbing information about his mental state and potential for future manipulation. Dr. Foster determined that Derek met criteria for narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features, meaning he had limited capacity for empathy and was highly likely to continue manipulative behavior unless forced to face consequences. The evaluation recommended long-term treatment and close monitoring of any future relationships. Amanda's successful harassment case against Derek established legal precedent for prosecuting psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. Her documentation of Derek's systematic gaslighting and reputation destruction provided a template for other victims to seek justice for similar abuse. Amanda's courage in pursuing legal action despite Derek's threats had created a pathway for other victims to come forward. Derek's final explosion came during a supervised family meeting designed to allow closure and discussion of restitution. When confronted with the full evidence against him and the legal consequences he was facing, Derek's narcissistic rage erupted in threats and accusations that revealed his complete inability to accept responsibility for his actions. He blamed everyone present for his situation and claimed that he was the real victim of a coordinated persecution campaign. The violent confrontation occurred when Derek attempted to physically attack me during the family meeting, claiming that I had destroyed his life with my lies and manipulation. Uncle Grant and Marcus Thompson restrained Derek while my father finally saw his adopted son's true nature without any masks or pretense. The attack provided additional criminal charges and eliminated any remaining sympathy Derek might have had from family members. Derek's removal from the family became complete when restraining orders were filed by multiple family members and his access to family property was permanently revoked. His belongings were packed by court-supervised movers while Derek remained in custody, ensuring that he could not return to plant additional false evidence or attempt further manipulation. The golden boy who had once seemed untouchable was now facing years in prison and complete social isolation. The investigation's conclusion revealed that Derek's manipulation campaign had been far more extensive and dangerous than anyone had initially realized. His willingness to have me falsely institutionalized, his systematic financial theft, and his psychological abuse of multiple women showed a pattern of criminal behavior that would likely have escalated if not exposed. Uncle Grant's decision to investigate rather than simply accept Derek's narrative had potentially saved multiple lives from further psychological and financial damage. The legal resolution of Derek's crimes unfolded over 6 months of court proceedings that fully exposed the scope of his manipulation and abuse. Derek ultimately accepted a plea bargain that included 5 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud, 3 years of supervised probation, and mandatory psychological treatment for personality disorders. The judge noted that Derek's systematic psychological abuse of family members represented a particularly cruel form of criminal behavior that warranted significant punishment. The family therapy process began immediately after Derek's sentencing, guided by Dr. Chen's expertise in manipulation recovery and family systems healing. The therapy sessions were initially painful as family members confronted the extent to which they had been manipulated and the damage their actions had caused to innocent victims. My parents struggled particularly with guilt over how easily they had believed Derek's lies and how close they had come to having me falsely institutionalized. My mother's breakdown during the third therapy session marked a turning point in our family's healing process. She sobbed as she realized how completely Derek had turned her against her own daughter and how her maternal instincts had been weaponized to support abuse rather than protection. Mother's recognition of her role in Derek's manipulation campaign was essential for rebuilding trust and preventing future vulnerability to similar tactics. My father faced the dual challenge of repairing family relationships while managing the business crisis created by Derek's embezzlement. Several clients had discovered the thefts and were threatening legal action against the firm. Dad worked 18-hour days for months to restore client trust, implement new security measures, and compensate victims of Derek's financial crimes. The business survived but required years to fully recover its reputation. Derek's removal from the family required both practical and emotional adjustments for everyone involved. The guest house where he had lived was cleaned and converted into a space for family therapy sessions and healing activities. Physical reminders of Derek's presence were systematically removed while the family worked to reclaim their home environment from his manipulative influence. Madison's healing process included extensive therapy for the psychological abuse she had endured during her relationship with Derek. Dr. Chin worked with Madison to help her recognize manipulation tactics and rebuild her sense of reality after months of gaslighting. Madison's recovery was complicated by the fact that she had been forced to participate in Derek's lies against me, creating additional guilt and shame that required professional support to resolve. The extended family reconciliation involved individual conversations with each relative who had been influenced by Derek's manipulation. Many family members felt embarrassed about how easily they had been deceived and concerned about their ability to recognize future manipulation attempts. Uncle Grant organized family education sessions about psychological manipulation tactics to help everyone understand what had happened and develop defenses against future abuse. Community response to Derek's conviction varied depending on how closely people had known him and how much they had invested in his false persona. Some community members struggled to accept that the charming young man they had known was capable of such systematic manipulation and abuse. Others came forward with stories about concerning behavior they had witnessed but previously dismissed. The church congregation where Pastor Williams had served faced its own reckoning with how their religious authority had been compromised by financial corruption. Pastor Williams was forced to resign and face his own legal consequences for accepting bribes to support Derek's manipulation campaign. The church implemented new financial oversight procedures and ethics training to prevent future exploitation of religious trust. Scarlett's vindication came when Northeastern University not only reinstated her graduate program but also provided a formal apology for questioning her mental health based on false family reports. The university offered counseling services and academic support to help her recover from the trauma of having her education suspended during Derek's manipulation campaign. Scarlett's professors and classmates rallied around her with support and encouragement. Financial restitution for Derek's crimes included repayment of stolen funds, compensation for legal fees, and damages for the psychological harm caused to his victims. Derek's assets were seized and liquidated to provide partial compensation, though the full financial impact of his crimes would take years to resolve. The family business insurance covered some losses, but significant personal costs remained. Amanda's closure came through successfully completing her harassment case against Derek and receiving compensation for the psychological damage his manipulation had caused. Her legal victory established important precedent for prosecuting emotional abuse and provided a roadmap for other manipulation victims to seek justice. Amanda became an advocate for abuse survivors and worked to raise awareness about psychological manipulation tactics. The support network that emerged from Derek's exposure included not only family members but also other victims, legal professionals, and mental health experts who had been involved in the case. This network became a resource for education about manipulation tactics and support for people recovering from similar abuse. The connections formed during the crisis continued long after Derek's conviction. Derek's final manipulation attempt came through his lawyer 6 months after sentencing, when he claimed to have undergone spiritual transformation in prison and requested family contact for healing and reconciliation. The family's united response was complete rejection of Derek's overtures, recognizing them as continuation of his manipulation tactics rather than genuine remorse or change. The family's united front against Derek's continued manipulation attempts demonstrated how much they had learned about recognizing and resisting psychological abuse. Dr. Chen's education about manipulation tactics had given everyone tools to identify Derek's strategies and respond appropriately. The family's ability to see through Derek's prison communication attempts showed their growth and recovery. Justice for Derek's victims extended beyond legal consequences to include acknowledgement, validation, and support for recovery from psychological trauma. Each person Derek had manipulated received professional counseling and family support for healing from the damage his lies had caused. The recognition that Derek's manipulation had been calculated and criminal rather than personal failings helped victims process their experiences and move forward. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, my life had transformed from the nightmare of false accusations and family betrayal to a foundation of truth, healing, and genuine relationships. Northeastern University had not only reinstated my graduate program but had also awarded me a research assistantship studying psychological manipulation in academic settings. My thesis on family systems and abuse dynamics was being considered for publication, turning my traumatic experience into valuable research that could help other victims. The family relationship rebuilding process continued through weekly therapy sessions that focused on honest communication and trust restoration. My parents participated actively in learning about manipulation tactics and examining how their own vulnerabilities had made them susceptible to Derek's lies. Mother joined a support group for family members of manipulation victims, while Dad implemented new verification procedures for important family decisions to prevent future deception. My parents' genuine remorse manifested through actions rather than just words. They established a scholarship fund for abuse survivors pursuing higher education and volunteered with organizations that supported manipulation victims. Their commitment to making amends extended beyond our immediate family to helping other people who had experienced similar betrayals of trust. Uncle Grant had become more than just a family ally, he had transformed into a passionate advocate for abuse awareness and legal reform. Grant used his legal expertise to help other families navigate the complex intersection of psychological manipulation and criminal behavior. He had successfully lobbied for changes in state laws that made emotional abuse easier to prosecute and provided better protection for manipulation victims. Madison's healing journey included developing a new romantic relationship with someone who treated her with genuine respect and kindness. Her new partner, James, was a social worker who understood trauma recovery and supported Madison's continued therapy and personal growth. Madison had also become involved in domestic violence prevention work, using her experience with Derek to help other women recognize manipulation tactics. My advocacy work had expanded beyond academic research to include public speaking about psychological manipulation in families. Universities, community organizations, and legal groups invited me to share my story and educate others about recognizing and responding to manipulation tactics. The speaking engagements were emotionally challenging but incredibly meaningful as a way to transform personal trauma into social good. Dr. Chen continued providing support not just for our immediate family but for the broader community of Derek's victims and other manipulation survivors. She had expanded her practice to include family systems therapy specifically designed for manipulation recovery and was training other therapists in these specialized techniques. Dr. Chen's work was becoming nationally recognized for its innovative approach to family healing after abuse. Amanda's friendship with me had grown into a strong alliance built on shared survival and mutual support. We collaborated on educational projects about manipulation tactics and provided peer support for other women recovering from similar abuse. Amanda had also returned to school to pursue a counseling degree, inspired by her own healing process to help other people navigate trauma recovery. Community education had become an ongoing priority as people realized how easily manipulation tactics could infiltrate trusted relationships and institutions. Schools, churches, and community organizations requested workshops about recognizing and preventing psychological abuse. The education efforts helped create more aware and supportive environments for potential victims. Derek's consequences continued as he served his prison sentence while receiving mandatory psychological treatment. Reports from prison counselors indicated that Derek showed little genuine remorse for his actions and continued attempting to manipulate staff and other inmates. The psychological evaluation recommended that Derek remain in treatment throughout his incarceration and receive continued monitoring after release. The family business had not only survived Derek's embezzlement but had become stronger through implementing new ethical guidelines and transparency measures. My father's commitment to honest business practices and client protection had actually improved the firm's reputation beyond its pre-crisis status. Several new clients had specifically chosen the firm because of its demonstrated integrity during the Derek crisis. New family traditions emerged that celebrated authenticity and mutual support rather than maintaining appearances or meeting external expectations. Holiday gatherings focused on genuine connection and honest communication rather than performance and competition. The family had learned to value truth over comfort and substance over style. My personal growth included not just recovery from Derek's manipulation but also development of new skills in recognizing and responding to manipulation in any context. The experience had made me more aware of psychological tactics but also more confident in trusting my own perceptions and seeking support when needed. The trauma had become a source of strength rather than just pain. Life lessons from the Derek experience extended far beyond our immediate family to influence how we approached all relationships and trust decisions. We had learned that genuine love and support don't require submission to abuse, that questioning concerning behavior isn't disloyalty, and that protecting family sometimes means rejecting family members who cause harm. The ongoing healing process included regular family meetings where everyone could share concerns, celebrate progress, and address any emerging issues before they became serious problems. These meetings provided a forum for maintaining the honest communication that had been Derek's first casualty and our ultimate salvation. Scarlett's future included plans for doctoral study in psychology with specialization in family trauma and manipulation recovery. The career path that had emerged from personal crisis would allow me to continue helping other families navigate similar challenges while contributing to academic understanding of psychological abuse dynamics. The work felt like a calling rather than just a profession. Final wisdom gained through this experience centered on understanding that healing is an ongoing process rather than a destination, that truth is more valuable than peace when peace is built on lies, and that genuine family relationships are characterized by protection rather than exploitation. Sometimes the greatest gift a family can give is learning who truly loves unconditionally and who loves only on conditions they control. The open-ending reflection acknowledges that our family's healing continues as an active process requiring ongoing commitment to honesty, support, and growth. Derek's manipulation had damaged trust and relationships in ways that would take years to fully repair, but the foundation of truth and genuine care that emerged from the crisis was stronger than what had existed before. What do you think about families that enable psychological manipulation? Have you ever experienced someone in your family who seemed perfect to everyone else but treated you differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Please subscribe for more stories about family drama, justice, and healing because everyone deserves to know they're not alone in these struggles. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that truth always wins in the end, even when it takes time. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize that real family protects and believes you, not the person hurting you. Stay strong, and remember that your truth matters.